Beloved Maryland couple Dick and Jody Villardo are murdered in their upscale neighborhood. And now cops get a big break in the case, a tip from one of their own, telling them to take a look at the boy next door, Brian Tomaszewski.
And said, hey, you might want to look at this.
When you got the phone call from the retired sergeant, what did you think initially?
We thought it was interesting. We thought there was potential.
Ends up when Brian was a juvenile, he burglarized the Villardo's home, then took one of their cars on a joyride.
Then all of a sudden, you have this golden suspect that's staring you in the face. He lives right next door. He knows the house. He is a #1 suspect.
But how could Brian kill Dick and Jody? The Tomaszewskis are all supposed to be on vacation.
Brian did not go on the trip to Alaska. It was just Scott, his mother and father, and his older sister.
Police interview Brian.
He didn't provide us anything really substantial.
Police no longer believe Brian is involved. So since the Villardos were also burglarized after being killed, cops turn their focus to local pawn shops hoping for a hit. And boy, do they get one.
All of a sudden, Scott showed up as pawning something.
That Scott is Scott Tomaszewski. Yes, Brian's little brother.
He pawns a ring
Belonging to?
belonging to his neighbor.
But not the Villardos. His other neighbor, Eve Dempscher, who lives directly across the street. The class ring had been reported stolen just a month before the Villardo break-in.
It fits now. It's starting to fit. We're starting to fit the crime to the person, if you will.
In fact, it's all captured on pawn shop surveillance cameras. The incriminating frame-by-frame evidence shows Scott Tomaszewski pawning the stolen ring.
All of a sudden, we now have probable cause for a burglary arrest.
But burglary is a far cry from murder. Detectives know they'll need direct evidence tying Scott to the murders. And they're hoping Scott packs something extra in his suitcase. Detectives know if Scott committed the murders, it happened sometime between 1:30 a.m. and the time he left for the cruise at 3 a.m.
We already knew that there was a very, very small window he had, if it was Scott, to commit this crime, and that he could very well have taken all of the evidence.
Where's Scott?
He was at sea. We knew he was coming into port in Juneau. That became the port of call that we were interested in acting on.
And investigators want to make sure that Scott isn't tipped off, giving him time to destroy evidence.
You could walk to the edge of the ship and toss off a Rolex watch, toss off cash, toss off bloody clothes. If we tipped our hand too soon, it was just another thing that could go wrong that would allow, if there was evidence on that cruise ship, that could allow that evidence to escape us.
Plus, investigators know Scott is in contact with his brother back home, evidenced by this text message from Scott while on the cruise ship. I'm like 2,000 miles away, and it's still scary. There's been a bunch of robberies in the area, and now a double murder, and all cops said before was it's landscapers or kids. Expletive lazy. How are these expletive employed?
What did you do?
What we decided to do was a simultaneous search warrant in Juneau as the ship was arriving, and on the Tomaszewski's house here.
To ensure they don't lose any evidence, the search warrants have to be served at the exact same moment.
We sent them out, we got them on the first flight we could on Friday, so we could make sure they got into Juneau Friday night, because they had to liaison with the Coast Guard, because as the ship's coming in, the other thing, we couldn't let him get off the ship. And if they had pulled into dock, then we weren't there to get him in his room. He could have easily slinked out and again, get that alert, get whatever it is, evidence goes with him and then goes in a trash can in Juneau. We'd never find it. So the Coast Guard actually held the ship up for us.
Yes, the Coast Guard holds the ship at sea.
When these law enforcement partners get together, boundaries go away, especially when you tell them, we're working this double homicide.
While they were in international waters, when we actually figured out where he was not in U.S. territory. He was on a boat in international waters.
So the ship is being held up at sea.
Yes.
He can't get off.
Right.
When that ship finally docks, what happens in Alaska?
Our folks, along with the local authorities, FBI, they liaison with the ship's crew. Even the ship wasn't quite aware of what was going on because, again, we couldn't risk.
You had to keep it close to the vest.
Yeah.
The FBI, the Coast Guard, cops from Juneau, and detectives from Montgomery County stormed the ship in Juneau and handcuffed Scott.
What was his reaction?
Just kind of nonplussed.
No reaction.
No. Not what you would expect.
Detectives hit the evidence lottery once inside Scott's cabin. In his wallet, they discover blood-soaked cash, and in the closet under his clothes, a knife. And back at the Tomaszewski home, cops find a little pile of incriminating evidence.
Go to the washing machine, and there's these musty, dark clothes in them. It looks like they have some sort of stain on them.
The washing machine turns up plenty of dirt on Scott, including a ski mask and gloves. Investigators arrest Scott on a burglary charge, but they have a strong feeling they'll be adding charges of double homicide. Police remove Scott from the ship in handcuffs, and his folks?
They got off the ship and went on a tour.
Mom and Dad got off the ship and went on a tour.
Yes.
While Scott's parents continue their vacation, their son meets with detectives back at the Montgomery County Police Department. Scott agrees to talk with investigators without an attorney. His interview is recorded.
When was the last time you were at their house?
15 years ago.
Was that long?
Yeah.
Scott explains to detectives that he grew up with the Villardo children, Andy and Katie, but since college, the families have drifted apart.
You didn't go in there to kill him, did you?
No, not at all.
So, what happened? Did you get startled? Like, what happened?
It all just happened so fast. I don't even know why or how it happened.
Do you think he knew who you were?
I don't know. I wanted to leave and I stabbed him.
What did you stab him with?
It was just a knife.
After murdering Dick, Scott tells cops he started stabbing Jody.
Did you stab her?
I fell on top of her with the knife. And that's when I just took off, ran home.
Then he tells detectives he ditched the knife.
What happened to the knife?
Pretty sure I threw it away.
Like in your house?
And trash can.
Inside your house?
Yeah.
As for an actual motive, the murders appear to be about as senseless and cold as Scott's final act in the home just moments after the murders.
Stop and drink a ginger ale, then go back to his house.
Murder is a thirsty business for Scott, according to detectives who found blood transfer on the fridge door and a can of ginger ale. And when they asked Scott about it, he said, quote, "I may have grabbed a ginger ale out of there because my throat was really dry." But while the evidence mounts, investigators are missing a huge piece of the puzzle. A second, larger knife they believe was used in the attack. One they believe they've seen before in this text message from Scott to his ex-girlfriend just days before the murder. It's a photo of a machete and this message. "You don't have a hockey mask I can borrow, do you? I need to get some work done." Then cops get a tip about a secret hiding place.
And we learned that there was a backpack secreted back in this, it was back in this closet behind this area.
Up next, police close in on the murder weapon.
You go back and look for that bag.
It's not there.
Then detectives discover Scott has help. You'll never guess from whom.
What kind of a person does that?
Perhaps a person that's trying to cover his tracks.